we can now fish rivers again now that the season is open, and we've definitely seen an increase in the numbers of people and newcomers to the sport getting more involved in river fishing. So in this video, in response to lots of the questions we've been getting, I talk you through why we set up the way that we do when we're feeder fishing on rivers, both for enjoyment and for safety. So as you can see on this particular river peg, there are huge boulders here which make it a lot more comfortable, but this is quite common on some of the rivers now. But the same setup would apply if I was on a natural bank. Now the first thing you want to think about is this base rock here. Now this is the position where your box is based. Try not to put anything down there, okay? On rivers like this, it's common for big boats, big barges to be coming past, and they create waves, and that might mean that the water's going to go over this rock here. So I see people with bait boxes and all sorts down here. Don't do it. You're going to lose tackle, you know, when those boats go past. And also, this is a winter river, and the river is actually coming up whilst I'm actually here today. There's extra water coming into the river, so that also means that this needs to be kept clean. A setup like this is ideal because, as you can see, because there's nothing down here, there's no base units, there's nothing down here, so this water could literally come up almost 2 feet, and I wouldn't even have to move my position because everything is positioned above that. So just think about that, you know, you don't want to be losing tackle, and you obviously want to be safe as well when you're on the bank as well. So it's a very simple setup. It's the same setup on a lot of venues I go to. Side tray at the side. I like one behind me. Lots of rivers, you're on natural banks, it's important to be comfortable. 4-meter river keep net, you know, it's something that not many people think about when they first start fishing on rivers. The reason why that's a different sort of a keep net is because, yes, it's 4 meters long, and that's really handy when you're on natural banks, because sometimes on rivers you might be higher off the water, and with you having a keep net that's 4 meters long, it means that even when you're sat high up off the water, there's still plenty of the net that's actually going to be able to reach the water and give the fish in that net plenty of space. All right. And the other reason why river nets are designed the way they are is because they are really strong. They're really durable, because obviously if boats are going past, the net is moving around all the time. It can be hitting rocks, it gets a lot of a battering, and the actual holes in the net are a little bit bigger. That just allows water, the flowing water, to go through the net, which means it's going to be less likely to be dragged down close into the bank or even up, you know, out of the water. That's why there aren't any fancy graphics on the top of these nets. They're designed like this for the water to go through. A rod position is very important when you're feeder fishing on rivers. I see this happen all the time, and when I explain to people why I position the things that I do, where I do, they see why. This river today is going from the left to right, so that means when we're feeder fishing, we always have the rod slightly downstream. So in today's case, that is slightly down to the right. The feeder arm always needs to be on the downstream end of your box. If that feeder arm was over here on this left hand leg here, I still need my rod pointing down. Well, what would happen is this feeder arm would be going right the way across here, and that would hinder me. That would hinder me getting fish into the net. It would hinder me after I've scooped any fish in the landing net, bringing that landing net up here to unhook them. It would be going right across you here. To be really uncomfortable, and potentially, you know, it could cost you fish. So by having it on the downstream end of your box, it just leaves all this area here free, okay? It just makes everything much easier. On the flip side of that, if this river was going from right to left, this feeder arm would be on that leg, all right, because that would then still free up all this area here. It's just about thinking in advance. It's a feeder arm, a river feeder arm that I'm using. The reason why this is different from a lot of the feeder arms that you see what we use on commercials or still waters, and that is for 2 reasons. The first reason is it's got 2 supports here, all right. That means it's going to be super stable, because as you can see, certainly for today's session, I've actually got it extended. all right, and that's because on rivers we tend to want to position, and we need to position the rod up in the air to get the line off the water. So inevitably that might mean you're using longer rods. It could be a 13-foot rod, sometimes even 14-foot, but it means because the rod's up in the air, that is obviously much more susceptible to the wind, and you want that rod to be as stable as possible so that you can see your bites. So that's why we have an extending feeder arm when we're fishing on rivers, and obviously the more you extend it, the less stable it's going to be. So that's why having one with 2 brackets on like this is going to be much more stable, and it also means you can adjust it as well. The other little detail as well, which a lot of people don't really think about when they first start fishing rivers, is the actual feeder rest itself. As you can see, it's a narrow design. If you was fishing with one of the ones that we use on still water, say if we were speed fishing, like one of the longer EVA ones that are 60 centimeters long, then when that is there in position, it's covering quite a bit of space there, and that can really be in your way if you're playing fish, or if you go to feather your line, or when you're reeling in to catch a feeder. You don't need one as long as that. You're only going to be fishing with the rod in one position. So whatever style of feeder rest that you use, just have one that's nice and narrow. Just a single locating one will mean that it's not going to get in your way there. There's only just one tiny little place there where your rod can go. And the final thing is, if you're fishing on tidal rivers, be very, very careful. Your safety is absolute paramount. Rivers, certainly tidal rivers, will come up, they will go down. Now there are websites out there where you can find out about what the actual tide times are, and they will also give you an idea of how big those tides are, and I'll put a link underneath this video for you that will take you to that sort of a website if you do want to find out about tide times. If you are going somewhere for the first time and you're unfamiliar with how much the water might actually come up, please always err on the side of caution. Certainly when you're feeder fishing, you don't need to be right in the water, all right? You can sit up off the water, and as a general guide, if it's a tidal river, when you get down to the water's edge, there will be areas that are wet. Even if this was at its lowest time of the tide, when the last previous high tide was in, there will be a wet mark on the bank, and that will give you an idea of how high that water is actually going to be coming during the day if you are on there whilst the river's actually going to be rising. So please be careful. There are so many different elements to fishing rivers, and I will be uploading more videos about fishing on rivers and these sorts of venues in future fishing basic videos. So if you don't want to miss out on those, don't forget to hit subscribe just there. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you next time.